Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to TEDxSBSC. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Mitali Nikore, and I go by a number of identities. I am often known as a development economist, sometimes an infrastructure economist. Others brand me as a gender economist or a gender policy specialist. But what I'm here to talk about today is very much in line with the theme of the TEDx event that is being held today, which is around 3D rendering ideas. So I just want to take 2-3 minutes to talk about, what do we really mean by 3D rendering ideas? And then talk to you about my story and talk to you about how the ideas and aspirations that we have, how do we make them a reality? And how this happened in my life and whether I'm done with my journey or not. So these are all some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. But I think just coming back to, taking a step back and coming back to analyze this theme of 3D rendering ideas, what do we really mean when we say realizing your idea in reality? All of us, I'm sure many of the people who are watching this TEDx talk today have some dreams, some aspirations. We keep thinking about it that, if this were to happen, this would be so, we would feel so good, or this would just make our life so much more meaningful, so much more impactful. And I think that is the core of this theme of 3D rendering ideas. It's about the fact that we're spending a lot of our time in 2D post COVID. We're meeting people virtually, even this event is happening virtually. But this blend of the fact that we are reading something, learning something online in 2D, and then applying it in our life in 3D is really this whole idea of 3D rendering ideas. It's about the realization of your dreams, your visions, everything that you're probably thinking about in 2D, and then rendering it truly in 3D. So, my story is not a very complex story. It's not a story of, overcoming a very, very challenging hurdle in life. And I think that's why it's relatable, because I am aware of my privilege, and definitely I have used my privilege to create a platform where others can progress in their careers, which probably they did not have. So my dreams and my 2D visions started around class 10. So I was in one of India's best schools, Delhi Public School, RK Puram, and there's a huge focus on science based education in my school. There used to be a lot of focus on that. And in class 10, I after my boards, I chose to go for humanities. At which point I very clearly elucidated to a lot of people that I wanted to go into policy making, and I wanted to work for the development sector. General feeling amongst the teachers was, here's a potential topper who's going ahead and taking humanities. So that was my first, I think, brush very early on with just breaking breaking some biases and breaking some myths, that people who are intelligent can take humanities. Following that, I was introduced to, through my school itself, to this activity called Model UN. And I think one of the reasons I absolutely just fell in love with the concept of Model UN was because in that period it was so novel. And the idea that we as students could think and debate over some of these biggest issues that were impacting international relations and international governance and international development was very exciting to me. But also the fact remained that in that time, in my first MUN, I never got to say a word. I was actually put into something called registration, and I had to manage the registration desk for all of these other delegates who were typically from debating societies, which and I didn't actually speak at all. And this was in class 11. And somehow in class 12, I got into my second MUN and I got the opportunity to be the rapporteur of my committee, which is, which is not a delegate or a chair, but just the person who takes attendance. And in that MUN, I mean, the first one I had to wear my school uniform. The second one, at least I wore formals. And I think half of the appeal of an MUN is that you wear formals. And that time I had also overcome a personal challenge, which was to lose a lot of weight and eating healthy, and I had changed my lifestyle. So I was literally, tagged as the transformation of 2006 or something like that. And I got a chance to say 4 sentences in that MUN while I was taking roll call and while I was chairing a little bit. But this experience of going to a competitive school, and then after that I went to Delhi University for my economics honors at Hindu College. And what was interesting was that I reached Hindu College and I auditioned for the debating society, and again I'm rejected. But luckily I happened to meet 2 other people who were also rejected from their auditions of the debating society, and the 3 of us just decided, you know what, we've had enough of the world silencing us, making us rapporteurs and making us manage registration desks. It's time that we also spoke up. So we set up our own debating and discussion society, mostly a discussion and MUN focused society called Caucus, the Discussion Forum. And we hosted our own MUN. It was the first MUN to be held in Delhi University, called the International Hindu Model UN 2008. And Caucus is alive to this day. I actually recruit a lot of interns from there today. And that was the kick. I chaired my first MUN, which I'm organizing on my own with sponsorship that I'm bringing in, of course, with the support and teamwork of our whole society, which we set up. But that was the whole point. That was the first big taste of in a sense power to change the narrative and to say that, you know what, I do not believe that if someone else doesn't give me an opportunity, I cannot create that opportunity for myself. So I think that was the first time that I did that in founding Caucus and in organizing IHMUN, which today continues to thrive and grow as an independent society in that college. Following my college education, I went to the LSE for my master's. At that point, I was very aware that it's important to not just be studying, but also to be networking and also to be working. It was not just a passion, it was not just a dream, but it was my sole reason for existence, the raison d'etre, in that sense that I would like to work in the UN. And that's when, in 2012 I graduated from the LSE and I was offered a consultancy with UN Women in New York. And that was my first job. I moved from London to New York, and this was only possible because my parents supported me financially. I go to New York and I start working, and within 2 months, my bubble was burst. And I was, thinking that, oh, I'll be changing the world and I'll be working on a lot of policies. And here I was just taking notes and, sitting in meetings quietly. And I was just absolutely shocked that, in this time, I'm not being impactful. And so I decided that I needed to make a change. And I told my parents, okay, I'm done taking financial support from you. And that again is a matter of huge privilege that I could say that, because of course that was a choice I was making. In most people's case, they don't have that choice. So I was very lucky and privileged to have that choice. But I made that choice in that moment and said, okay, meant that I returned to India, took a job, started working in consulting. And luckily, they sent me to Africa to do projects there. And suddenly I felt that my whole world had changed. I was exposed to the most challenging work environments, long work travel, long work hours, extremely hardworking environment, and just the most isolating environment because I didn't know anyone in South Africa. I didn't have any friends there. And I was alone, single, a young girl, just plucked out of this environment which I held dear and familiar. And I was supposed to work there, and I did. I just completely immersed myself in work. I didn't complain about the timelines and the deadlines. I didn't complain at all. I just worked very, very hard. And only when there was protests and violence in Johannesburg did I, choose to then come back to India. And I was very clear that I wanted to continue working in the global south and never go back to that environment in a developed country, because the role and the interface that you feel with an actual person that you're about to impact in the development sector isn't possible if you're sitting in a developed sector setting, in a developed country setting. Back to India, I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to work with PwC, and then followed that with ADB, and then finally with the World Bank, and also with UN Women currently. But almost like a full circle in my career. But I think what was happening in this entire period, I felt like I was definitely achieving. ADB was a huge milestone. I still work with ADB, I still consult with them. And that was a huge milestone for me personally in my dreams and in realizing 3D, because of the fact that ADB is an environment which encourages meritocracy, which encourages, to really make you the best version of yourself. And I learned so much skills wise. And then I moved to World Bank, where I was able to hone my skills even more. But in this journey, I started feeling that I was losing my personal voice. I needed to have my own opinions and my own voice. I mean, one thing is to do work that, your boss is telling you, or somebody in your office is telling you, that work that needs to be done, which is definitely very meaningful and requires, all of your skill sets. But to have a platform where I can actually voice my opinions, where I can actually research and have informed opinions, not just opinions based on what I'm reading, but rather what I'm actually studying. And that's how Nikore Associates was born. Nikore Associates is my think tank, which I set up in 2019, and today it's 3 years old. And in these 3 years, we've had just a beautiful journey. We started off with maybe 3 or 4 people. Today, we've had over 250 people work with us. We are 90% of our interns have been young women. So this opportunity that I've had to just get to know young women who are students and then be part of their journey, whether they're getting into graduate schools abroad or whether they're getting into new jobs, or if I can open some doors for them in these multilateral organizations. A lot of people write to me on LinkedIn and other forums where they ask, how do we work in multilateral development? And I didn't have anyone when I was doing this process and I was discovering my way into these organizations. it was difficult for me because I didn't have a mentor. Trying to do with Nikore Associates, and what I'm hoping that I will be able to do, is to create a pipeline of young women, especially, but also young men who have a feminist mindset and who are completely, bought into the idea of gender equality, and are then going to enter these institutions as intelligent, young, driven, passionate women who are going to then change the narrative. And it can happen. And I'm hoping that I will be able to contribute to this journey of changing the narrative within multilateral organizations by producing skilled and talented people who can join them, but also have this, grit and confidence to question some of these things and to question these ideas. There was a time when I used to be a person in a meeting who was totally silent and just taking notes, and that happened for many years of my early career. And I hope that I, can create young people, can create confidence in young people, that when they go in, they don't do what I did. They go in and they question from day one, that, why are we doing this, what are we doing this for, what is the purpose of this, and how is this going to change the status quo and have a development impact, especially on gender equality. I think Nikore Associates has had a number of achievements in the last 2 or 3 years. This is a picture of me and my team going and making a presentation in Bangalore at the International Conference of the Future of Women. We actually contributed a book chapter to this book called The Indian Women's Journey, where we studied, the last 7 decades of data on women's labor force participation. And of course, featuring my team here as well, who did a lot of the work, especially around the data analysis. Luckily, a lot of our research, especially around female labor force participation, gender responsive budgeting, has been featured at a number of platforms. And it's not just me, but also my team, which has got an opportunity to make these presentations. So I think, overall, the strength for us has been in the team. And this is a true realization of the theme, as I was saying from the beginning, of 3D. And this entire concept of realizing your dreams is really the story here. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this address and for listening to this uh, monologue from me. I hope that in times to come, as COVID eases, this talk can be more interactive.